From their secret visitations at night to the placement of their lips upon victims' necks, from the penetration of their fangs to the subsequent exchange of fluids, from their decadent lifestyles to their ability to bewitch and charm all those about them, vampires and vampire fiction have been bound up with eroticism and themes of intimacy. These associations seldom blunt the horror with vampires, however, for vampires are still monsters, and so their ability to seduce is a deadly weapon. And we're going to draw upon this theme in today's adventure. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to travel to the land of Barovia. That's right, the very first domain of dread, the one that started it all, the one whose Dark Lord is the Dark Lord of Dark Lords, Strahd von Zarovich. As with the rest of my Ravenloft videos, we'll talk about what the domain is, list some media to help you get an imaginative grip on it, and then sketch out an adventure. In this case, our adventure is a short one-shot going from levels 3 through level 5, that is, PCs will complete the adventure at level 5, and then at the end, with DM's permission, level up to 6. The adventure draws upon Book of the Raven from Candlekeep Mysteries, as well as from the second edition Ravenloft adventure, Love Lies Dying, Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, and Junji Ito's Blood-Sucking Darkness. Before we get started on the adventure, however, what is the domain of Barovia? Well, in Barovia, the night is a curse. The howls of wolves and the shrieks of raven swarms echo through the dismal valleys and oppressive forests. In isolated communities, superstitious villagers find the brightness in their lives smothered by the dread of their aloof overlord, Strahd von Zarovich, as well as his baleful servants, and other ancient evils that fester unopposed. All the domain's residents know to fear the mists and the long Barovian nights, as through them the devil Strahd watches and reaches to claim whatever he desires. Barovia is not just the setting for Castle Ravenloft and associated adventures like Curse of Strahd. It's also a majestic Gothic landscape, full of classic horror monsters such as vampires, werewolves, ghosts, zombies, ghouls, and more. And as my viewers know, there is a lot of vampire fiction out there, like a whole lot. There's no way to cover all of it, or even the best of it, so instead, I'm going to list a few bits of media which will either inform the adventure that we sketch out, or which are just really cool and my readers may not have heard of yet. So I'm going to put to one side the 1897 novel by Bram Stoker, Dracula, as well as the films Nosferatu from 1922, Dracula from 1931, Dracula from 1955, Dracula, Prince of Darkness from 1966, all those other Hammer horror films about Dracula. Fright Night from 1985, The Lost Boys from 1987, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, Interview with the Vampire from 1994 based on the Anne Rice novel from 1978, Vampire Hunter D from 1985, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust from 2000, along with any number of other well-inspired media. Here are the bits of media which I think are worth mentioning here for this adventure. First, I'm going to mention Edgar Allan Poe's 1840 tale, The Fall of the House of Usher. I absolutely love this tale, and although it's not a vampire tale at all by any means, its central figure is a tragic sort of individual that is going to inform one of the NPCs that we're going to put in this adventure. When it comes to vampire fiction, and romantic vampire fiction at that, you have to start, of course, with 1872 Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. This is a classic Gothic vampire story steeped in eroticism as well as homoeroticism, where the titular vampire shows up and then people start becoming sick, anemic, and there are other mysteries that show up, a likeness to a portrait and more. It's a lovely Gothic tale and certainly in the spirit of Barovia. I also recommend the anonymously written 1895 vampire story, The Vampire of Vorla, which is recently reprinted in an excellent volume by Valancourt Press. This tale concerns the nightly sojourns of a sailor who goes to visit his mistress, growing weaker and weaker over time. You can guess what the twist is. There's also Bram Stoker's 1914 short story, Dracula's Guest. While many people are aware of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, not as many people might know that there's this short story about Dracula too, or rather about the attempted visitations of an English realtor who isn't identified as Jonathan Harker, but who is totally Jonathan Harker. I also really love Tanith Lee's 1984 tale, Bite Me Not, or Fleur du Fleur. Lee is one of my favorite writers, and this tale also appears in a volume that I can't recommend enough, the Penguin Book of Vampire Stories. There's a lot of classics in there. In Lee's tale, vampires are strange creatures, almost like a cross between fallen angels and space aliens. The way that they think, the way that they communicate, and the way that they perceive us and our environments is completely opposed to how we normally think of things. There's a lot of poetry in this piece, and I really enjoy it for that reason. And speaking of poetry and the way that vampires talk and communicate, there's also the 1986 tale by Thomas Ligotti, The Lost Art of Twilight. You can find it in the collection Songs of a Dead Dreamer and Grimscribe. This is a fascinating story about how a certain individual came to be a vampire, their transition into that process, and the sort of cognitive and sensory changes that they underwent all throughout. As with all of Ligotti's works, it's very deep and very moving and very gothic and spooky, highly recommended. And for a fun vampire collection in general, there's the 2011 collection Blood and Other Cravings, edited by Ellen Datlow. These don't lean so much into the romantic side of vampire fiction, but rather into other sides, such as body horror. There's a tale by Michael Sisko in it called Bread and Water, which is just body horror about how vampires can't eat regular food. It's really fascinating. I also really liked the 2013 film Only Lovers Left Alive, written and directed by Jim Jarmusch, and some of the soundtrack is also done by Jim Jarmusch's band. As with all of his films, it's very, very slow-moving, but it stars Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston as vampires who are long estranged from each other and who come to meet together in the middle of a crisis. They're vampires, so it's a very, very slow-moving crisis, and even when it picks up speed, it's still kind of a slow, glacial crisis. But it's very, very beautiful. The soundtrack is absolutely haunting. It's one of my favorite atmospheric films, in fact. There's also Nathan Ballingrud's 2014 story, Sun Bleached, which is one of the most devastating and horrifying vampire stories I have ever read. This is a story where the vampire seduces the victim, but the seduction isn't really sexual, it's a different kind of seduction. And the way that he seduces his victim, this vampire, is so awful and so evil. If you want a depiction of vampires as real monsters, check out Sunbleached. You can find it in Ballingrud's collection, North American Lake Monsters, which I also recommend in general. And speaking of horrific, check out Junji Ito's 2019 work, Blood-Sucking Darkness. This is a fun little horrifying tale that isn't really about vampires, although it has very, very vampiric themes. There's definitely blood-sucking and drinking blood and control over bats and body horror and stuff like that, as well as an element of twisted romance. We're going to take the antagonist from Blood-Sucking Darkness, in fact, and put him into our adventure. And speaking of which, our adventure takes PCs across 3 acts from levels 3 through level 5, and here's in general what the structure is. First, in Act 1, at level 3, the PCs emerge from the mists of Ravenloft to find themselves in Barovia. In the midst of combat, they meet a new friend, and then travel to explore what seems like a haunted house. In Act 2, at level 4, having learned the truth that the house that they're staying in is not haunted, the PCs must contend with a different mystery, the mystery of who is a vampire, for it seems that there is one. And then, in Act 3, at level 5, having learned that the truth is much, much, much worse, the PCs must do great battle with a horrific foe. So let's lay out this adventure in detail. First, in Act 1 at level 3, the PCs arrive in Barovia through the mists of Ravenloft. They emerge in a gloomy, autumnal, deciduous forest, and no sooner than they have a look around than they are attacked by a werewolf. And in the midst of battle, the PCs are joined by, but not saved by, a Swarm Keeper Ranger who commands swarms of bats. This ranger is pale, has dark hair and dark eyes, and despite his vocation, wears gothic clothing. He introduces himself as Usher and says that he's on a journey to reclaim his family's home. He's never been to his family's home before, he was born abroad, but now he's headed to it for the first time. He's heard that there are monsters in it, and he wants to clear them out and reclaim the home for himself. He's friendly with the PCs and asks the PCs to accompany him. Now, in case any PCs have suspicions that this character is a vampire, all tests reveal that he is not. He is indeed human, and PCs might be able to see this through wounds that he got in the battle with the werewolf, wounds which do not heal, in the way that a vampire's would. Usher breathes, he has a heartbeat, all the tests for being human pass. In fact, he is one. Usher leads the PCs to his historic home, Chalet Brantifax. He uses a map to get there. The chalet appears to be abandoned, and as the PCs explore it, run the Book of the Raven from Candlekeep Mysteries, but make a few changes. First, get rid of the introduction where the PCs receive a book and get a map and get clues and things. In our adventure, the PCs already begin a short distance from the chalet, and they're going to be accompanied there by their newfound friend, Usher. Second, and on that topic, ignore the map that comes with the adventure. This map is just a stack of red herrings. There's all these locations that are not actually described or keyed into the adventure, and the one location that matters, the chalet, has its own gridded maps that you can use instead. So ignore the map, none of the locations other than the chalet has anything to do with what we're setting up here for this adventure. Third, ignore any quests having to do with Shadow Crossing or Harn Mausoleum. We don't need those things either for what we're doing, and they're kind of confusing too. Really, we just need the chalet and its contents. Other things we're going to add to that. Now, when the PCs arrive, the were-ravens should be kept out of sight, and they should use their mimicry ability to make spooky noises to scare the PCs and make them think that the place is actually haunted. If the PCs suspect that the place is haunted, these suspicions might seem to be confirmed with the actual ghosts that are here and there. Whether the PCs discover the were-ravens before they discover the actual ghosts, however, is up to what the PCs do and also up to how the DM wants to run it. Eventually, the were-ravens are discovered, and when they're discovered, they're in human form. I cannot stress this enough. Make sure that the PCs discover the were-ravens in their human form. This way, later on, at some point of the DM's choosing, you can have a dramatic moment where they all shift at once, or something like that. And when they're discovered, there's suddenly a kind of impasse. The were-ravens explain that they were just trying to scare the PCs away, that they've been using this house as a meeting place for their society for a long time, that they live there, that they're happy, and they don't want to leave. Meanwhile, Usher, who wants to claim his family home for his own, does want them to leave. Neither party is willing to get violent or use violence against each other, so all parties should agree that they should talk it over and work it out over the next few days, and in the meantime, everyone can just stay in the house. Now, once this plot point has been reached, the PCs reach level 4, and we proceed to Act 2. In Act 2, at level 4, the PCs are still at Chalet Brantifax, and Usher and the were-ravens are there too. However, in addition, two disturbing things have happened. First, the were-ravens all begin showing signs of anemia, blood loss. They're tired, they're pale, and they notice. Second, and perhaps more disturbing, the PCs all wake up with blood all over their mouths. Blood that's not theirs, for none of them are bleeding. The were-ravens panic. They accuse the PCs of being vampires, and it's up to the PCs to prove that they and Usher are not. Now, fortunately, the were-ravens are not fanatical in these accusations, so if the PCs can provide adequate proof or sufficient justification, the were-ravens will accept it. However, this won't calm them down or remove the alarm. Clearly, there's a vampire somewhere about. The were-ravens ask the PCs to find where the vampire may be. Go outside, see if there's a vampire lair nearby. Find it and destroy it, please. Now at this point, any PCs who roll sufficiently high when making an intelligence check, or especially an intelligence religion check, should realize that it doesn't make a lot of sense for a vampire to break into a house and drink people's blood. This is because a vampire needs an invitation to enter someone's home. So something should feel a bit off, but it's not clear what it is. If the PCs heed the were-ravens and they're imploring, they go vampire hunting, and they should be able to find a vampire spawn somewhere nearby. That is, somewhere outside the chalet, somewhere among the mists and in the forest. It's not hard to find a vampire spawn, it's Barovia after all. So once the PCs find a vampire spawn and they slay it, it should seem like their troubles are over. In fact, however, this vampire spawn has nothing to do with the mystery at the chalet. So when the PCs return and they've got proof of the vampire spawn being killed, maybe they bring its head or something, everyone rejoices and everyone is relieved. Scare is over, problem solved, vampire killed. This is why everyone's panic redoubles the next day, when the were-ravens' anemia worsens, and the PCs wake up again with more blood on their mouths. It hasn't stopped. So at this point, if the PCs haven't already chosen this, some internal investigation is in order. At some point after this, perhaps while doing an all-night stakeout, pun intended, the PCs discover the horrifying truth. They find their companion Usher up in the wee hours, commanding his bats to siphon bits of blood from the were-ravens, and then to deposit it into the mouths of sleeping PCs, like a mother bird feeding her chicks. It's horrifying! And if caught in the act, Usher becomes manic. He becomes a fanatic. He claims that he loves the PCs. He was just trying to nourish them, to feed them, and at the same time claim what is rightfully his home. Don't they see? Don't they see? And at this point, in response to whatever the PCs do, Usher becomes hostile and attacks. Give him the statistics of a Strigoi, but with maximum hit points, 3 uses of legendary resistance, and let him start out with 3 Sturges, only these Sturges are actually his vampire bats. They're bats, but they have the statistics of Sturges. Usher fights to the death, and once he dies, the were-ravens approach, having been awakened by the sounds of struggle. If and when they're told what happened, the were-ravens thank the PCs for defeating the monster. And maybe at that point start talking about their society, the Society of the Crimson Sash, if they haven't already talked about that. Before getting too relaxed, however, the were-ravens warn that since Usher was a monster, it's best that his body be disposed of properly. He should be decapitated and dismembered so that he doesn't arise again in some undead form to attack. Any checks that the PCs make, whether based in wisdom or charisma or intelligence or whatever, they all corroborate this account. This should seem like a very recommended course of action. Decapitate and dismember Usher's corpse, and then bury the body parts in various ends of the yard surrounding the chalet. Once the PCs do that, they reach level 5, and we proceed to Act 3. In Act 3, level 5, we have a short finale. The next day, or perhaps days later, or perhaps weeks later, however long it takes for the PCs to let down their guard and to have a nice, normal, long rest at the chalet, the PCs awaken to find that the were-ravens have been murdered. Not only have they been thoroughly exsanguinated, their blood drained entirely, but they have been torn limb from limb, and their body parts now lie among splintered furniture and crumbling bits of wall. And whether the PCs search for the cause or wait inside the chalet, they soon discover the horrific truth. A huge, undead monster looms before them. Its body is mostly constituted by fluttering bats, but amid the bats, suspended by their collective flight, there float all the limbs, the torso, and the head of Usher. Separated from each other, the bats are nonetheless functioning like his veins once did. They're ferrying blood from one location to another, forcibly circulating it. A mad, long-distance homeostasis. Impossible! This is Monster Usher. He cackles and attacks. Monster Usher has the statistics of a zombie clot, but with maximum hit points. He has 3 uses of legendary resistance, along with 3 legendary actions per round. He can use them to make a slam attack, to move without provoking an attack of opportunity, or to sacrifice a few of his bats to heal 1d12 plus 3 hit points. As Monster Usher attacks the PCs, he wails and moans about how he loved them so much, about how he welcomed them into his home. He nourished them, he fed them, for blood is the life! Blood is the life! And he fights until he is destroyed. As he finally dies, shuddering piecemeal to the ground, so does a monstrous earthquake rock the foundations of Chalet Bantifax. As the PCs scramble to safety, and as the Ravenloft mists envelop them, they witness with a backward glance the fall of the House of Usher. So that's our short adventure in Barovia. What do you think? Too small? Too self-contained? It's missing a certain figure whose name rhymes with Brad von Zarovich? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, tell me what your favorite romp in Barovia would be. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things, click like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell if you want notifications on my new videos. Thanks very much.